Welcome to the Leadership in Land podcast, where we talk about what actually moves the needle in the land business. This show isn't about getting rich or quick schemes or magic mail pieces. It's about leadership, systems, decision making, the stuff that you just happen to figure out after your third or fourth pricing mistake, or maybe just your first. This deal looks great on paper, guy, in a moment. Well, tune in with me today, my friends, and let's dive right in.
You're listening to the RE Tipster Podcast Network.
Okay, so quick question for you. Have you heard of our Skool community? I just want to make sure to invite you to check that out. If you're listening to this episode, it's actually kind of old, to be honest with you. And so if you want our latest, if you want our greatest content we're putting out, real conversations about leadership, decision making, building a land business that actually works in the real world, get inside our Skool community where you get access to the free leadership course, plus bonus episodes, discussions, and insights that honestly just don't make it onto the podcast. So if you're serious about this, you want to learn more about leadership, get in the community, check it out, leadershipinland.com or school.com/leadershipinland. All right, let's get in the episode. Hey guys, Dave Deniston here with Generation Family Properties, the Land UnConference, Leadership in Land, and probably five other things that I can't think of right this second. Hey, I been on this journey lately of just re-looking at our marketing stack and trying to decide where do we want to focus on, where do we want to experiment, and what do we want things to look like. Now, in the past, I've done everything from mailing to texting to hiring other services to do cold calling. And we've come back to mailing once again for 2025, and we look forward. And I've been exploring even on the selling side, hey, does it make sense for us to do something different? So I've been re-exploring things like texting, RVMs, cold calling, and whatnot. And with all this concern right now of litigation, and I've heard of a number of different people getting in lawsuits and having to settle, whether they were cold calling, RVMing, I wanted just to relook at what are the possible costs. What does it look like for doing it the most compliant way relatively while still doing the activity versus the least compliant way? Because I was just naturally curious to see, does this make sense? How much does it cost? What are different services that are available? And wanted to share my results with the community. And so I'm going to share with you 4 different softwares that a couple of them you've probably heard of, a couple of them you haven't, that was just comparing and contrasting one versus the other, pros and cons, good and bad, and wanted to share with you on the journey what I've been finding, what it's like, and share with you a few tricks that I've picked up along the way. None of these are perfect. Depending upon the volume you're doing, depending upon the risk you're willing to take, each of these things may or may not be a good fit for you as you look forward. So with all that in mind, I want to share with you a video that got me started on this. So let me share my screen. So this was a video. Cameron, my guy Cameron here, as we're talking about doing another experiment of some sort, our last one on data, went really, really well. This was one that was talking about what is the best skip tracing service for real estate in 2025. And so this guy, great video, going into depth in a bunch of different services. So you can see it's 19 minutes of different stuff. At the end of the video, he says he thought that Skip Matrix was the best. And so Cameron said, maybe we should do Skip Matrix. And I was like, everyone's doing direct skip. I wonder how accurate it is. Does it make sense to do something else? My good friend Callan Faulkner has been talking about direct skip for years. We've used it in the past. And I always got kind of a icky feeling about it. And I was like, I wonder if there is something better. And so I went and did a head-by-head test with Skip Matrix as we've been exploring some dispo strategies using calling and RVMs and stuff like that to help us sell more properties quickly. So what we did is we had a list from South Carolina, a property we had bought out there. We pulled a bunch of different records from Land Portal, and then we ended up having the from Land Portal the records, right? And now we needed to skip trace them. So let me share with you the results of what we found when we did it. And then I'll share with you a little bit of the softwares. So if we take a look here at our test, what we did, there were, for this property that we own in Charleston County, South Carolina, we pulled those records from Land Portal, and then we also did a skip trace from them to see what it was like. Skip matrix, we compared direct skip and skip matrix side by side. In this one particular case, obviously, different counties, different states, different properties may get different results. But what we found was that out of approximately 370 different polls that got skip traced, 315 matched the two. And what the gentleman was saying in the video was, oh, you'll get a lot more high quality numbers. And I was looking at this saying, you have 315 out of 370. That's like an 80% plus match on the numbers. Maybe you get a little bit better, but is it worth the cost? So if we look at skip matrix, so if you pull up the website, let me walk you through it. So skip matrix, nice looking website. There's some things I like about it, don't like about it. The number one thing is if you look at pricing, you notice it's 15 cents a match. If you do 10,000 records, 100,000 records is 10 cents a match. So woohoo, you get some better pricing on it. If you do 10,000 records, you get 13 cents a match. If you do 5,000 records, you're doing 14 cents a match. And so as usual, hey, you do something in bulk. This pricing, I was like, man, the deliverability better be so much higher. But unfortunately, it ended up being very, very similar. Some things that I found out as I went through this process with them. One thing that I like about direct skip is you start getting the results instantaneously. Skip matrix ends up emailing you, and you might get it the same day if you submit it on like a Friday or a Saturday. They do some sort of manual thing, and so you may not get it until Monday or Tuesday. So direct skip was definitely faster. Direct skip was definitely cheaper. I pulled up as I was doing it because I started to run low on credits. And this is a hack, by the way. If you're running low on credits, they're going to end up asking you to buy more, right? So if you end up doing with them, you can see here with a quote unquote 24-hour flash sale, you can see I had gotten down to 544 credits. They're saying buy more, right? So if you get 10,000, you're at 7 cents a credit. If you're at 30,000, you get 6 cents a credit. Compare that here, 13 cents compared to 7, like you're paying twice as much. Are you getting the same exact results? Pretty much for 80% of the records. So that was fascinating. Something else that I thought was interesting is looking at the results that we ended up getting from Land Portal too. So let me re-show that screen again. When we ended up pulling from Land Portal, you can see what were the matches to each of those two. It was completely different. 354 records and only 80 matched. Now, by the way, this is for the first number, which supposedly is supposed to be the best one. I didn't look at the second number or third numbers. There might have been matches in between here and there. I didn't want to do that exhaustive of a study. I just want to do something relatively simple to give us an idea of what might be good, what might be bad. I would love to hear from you on skip tracing services, what that might be like for you. And so the next thing I wanted to take a look at after doing some of these studies, on the skip tracing services was looking at, what if we do a DNC and litigator scrub separate? All right. So I went and did different services. I looked at like 6 altogether and got it down to 2 that I liked. And I put some notes here in Chat GPT as I was doing this project to help me out with it. So let me share those with you. So what I found from taking notes on it, there were 2 services, TCPA Litigator List, which our friend Joe Roberts, who does a bunch of cold calling, uses, and I looked at the DNC project. For someone like Joe, I think TCPA Litigator List makes so much sense. You get a flat fee, $299 a month, up to 300,000 records. So you can do a lot of data for essentially like 1 cent per record. So extremely cheap.
Writing and sending purchase agreements doesn't have to take all day. With Stride CRM, you can generate a full contract with 1 click, send it to the seller, and track every step until it's digitally signed. No more switching between DocuSign and Google Drive and email. Stride keeps everything digital, fast, and organized in one place. Visit stridecrm.co and start watching your business improve today.
What I did like about it was that you didn't have to manipulate the spreadsheet. So if I had one big spreadsheet, I wanted to upload it. It was easy to do and get done very, very quickly. And so I did one with all of the numbers on it. I did one with just the 1 number on it. And it was a little harder to follow when you have a whole bunch of numbers, like what Direct Skip gives you, for example. One of the cool things that they do is that they separate the files for you. So they'll have a clean file, they'll have a total file, they'll have a dirty file phone number. So it's already sorted for you, which is great, that I liked about it. I didn't like the output that much. As I tested it out on smaller batches, in some cases it erased all of the numbers, which I didn't really understand. And I didn't like that there wasn't a quick way to retrieve past uploads. It was kind of a struggle to get back in and find files when I did it. Maybe I just didn't know the right place to look, but it wasn't very user-friendly to do so. You certainly could look back on your emails, because they do send you an email with a link and you can get it that way. DNC project, meanwhile, was a pay-as-you-go. And what was really interesting about this, for someone like myself that wouldn't be doing it very often, they, I think, are great for low to mid-volume users. And what was interesting was they separated out pricing. So you had federal DNC pricing, which varied per record. So for example, $5 for 10,000 records, 35 cents for 5,000 records. So of course, the more you do, the cheaper they're giving it to you. Meanwhile, there's a state DNC scrub that they add in, which only includes certain states. Colorado, you can see here, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Texas, Wyoming. All of those, if you need it, it doesn't matter what your list volume was. If it was 10,000, 5,000, 20,000, 30,000, it was always a flat $99. Litigator scrub, when it's, again, a flat $349. So whether you're doing 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, it's always $349. So if you're doing this a lot, doing a lot of volume, doing the litigator scrub makes a lot of sense to me. I thought that the output was much, much better. It was easier to follow, and I found it easier to get past scrubbed lists. So overall, I like the DNC project for my particular tastes and whatnot. Now, the next step of the process was I went and compared, if I get stuff from Direct Skip and I run it through DNC project, am I getting the same results, different results? If different, how different? And so I ran 2 different lists through it, total of about, I think it was 1,500 records, something like that I ran through. And I compared side by side, and I was honestly shocked that for the federal DNC scrub, I didn't do state, I didn't do litigator, I just did federal DNC scrub. Every single record matched direct skip. I was shocked. I thought for sure there would be differences. I thought maybe it's so cheap at direct skip because it's like old data that they're selling, but I literally caught not a single difference or error, which surprised me. I was very, very skeptical of direct skip for all of these reasons coming into this trial, and pleasantly surprised to find out that they're cheap and the quality is practically just as good as anyone else. As I think about reflecting on this project, we certainly had a lot of different phone numbers that were different through Land Portal. So it's probably worth me doing another look to direct test, hey, if they have so many phone numbers, what are the deliverability results? Now, maybe that's another video for another day. I did want to share as well, as I've been thinking and pondering and thinking about how much does this cost, right? So what are the costs? We go through this effort of doing all this DNC stuff, and okay, let's say you agree with me that direct skip is the right thing for you or not. But if you do decide direct skip is, then if we take a look at some costs, let's take a look at just comparing the overall thought process of how does it compare when we do ringless voicemails, if we do cold calling, stuff like that. For the purpose of this test, I ran a larger list, about 10,834 records, as though I was going to do cold marketing, which I'm not necessarily suggesting anyone should do, but I was just going through a test to see what it would be like in terms of what is deliverability, what does that look like? So this was Georgia in particular. Right now, because you can't really mail Georgia, this to me is like the best possible state that if I'm going to do cold, this is the one I'm going to look at because of the mailing issues in Georgia of having to have all the stupid disclosures on envelopes, and it's a whole pain in the butt. So if I'm going to do it, it's going to be in Georgia. So there we had 10,834 records. Of those records that we scrubbed, right, to see, let's remove people that are DNC away. So that way, all we have left are people that have never opted into the federal DNC, right? So we got 1,956 mobiles, 1,642 landlines. So if you're doing RVMs, they're not going to work on landlines, right? They're only going to work on mobiles. And that gives us, assuming that you kept all of the phone numbers, you'd probably get maybe 6,000 out of the 10,834 that might be mobiles, all right? Assuming you kept a similar ratio and kept all of the people that are, not on the DNC list, that are on the DNC, rather. I ran some numbers here. So assuming that it costs you, right, to get data, I'm assuming a really, really cheap cost of 3 cents. Whether you have Land Portal or you have Land Vision or whatever it is, there's still a cost to it. You might have to do some access scrubbing or something like that. So 3 cents a record to me is the bare minimum. It might be much higher. You might be paying 5 cents or 10 cents or something like that. I'm assuming a very cheap cost of 3. All right. This is going to be true, of course, whether you are mailing or not mailing. Skip tracing, I assumed 6 cents. So I'm assuming that we got some sort of cheap plan. Obviously, it might be 10 cents. It might be like 15 or 14 cents if you use skip matrix we were just looking at before. And so I'm assuming that your cost, right, if you do the numbers here, you had to skip trace the whole enchilada. You can't just get that with it. You had to skip trace them all. You're at $650. Now, if you're dropping an RVM, I'm assuming there's a cost to doing that too, at 3 cents a record. Again, the more you buy, you might be able to get a bulk discount. You might be able to get cheaper than I've gotten here. But I just want to go through these numbers as an idea. All right. So if you follow me here, this cost is the same no matter what you look at. This cost is the same no matter where you look at because you got to get them skip traced, right? This RVM cost is variable depending upon how many records you are doing it for. So if you do it only to people that have been scrubbed to remove DNCs, you're at $60. If you are doing everybody that has mobiles, regardless of whether they are on DNC or not, right? It's a higher cost because you're dropping about 6,000 rather than 2,000, right? So there's a higher cost for dropping it. So what's our total cost? Very, very similar. Obviously, you just have this $120 difference between the two, right? Now, how many records are you doing this over? This is where I thought it got interesting, in that the total cost, assuming you've removed all DNCs, right, you're at about 53 cents a record. When you start comparing that to mailing costs, well, if your all-in mailing costs are like 63 cents a record, you are cheaper. You are still cheaper. You're saving yourself, let's say, about 20% of the costs. So it still is cheaper to do something like RVMs. But certainly if you say, screw it, I'm going to take the risk and drop RVMs on everybody, you're looking at about 19 cents a record in total. Now, compare this to cold calling, where you don't care if it's mobiles or landlines, you're calling it all, right? So you're able to take advantage of more records. Here, going from 1956 to 3598. Now, I'm assuming these are all the same, right? This doesn't change. These costs are baked into it. This is assuming you're not doing RVMs and you're only doing cold calling. I had to come up with some sort of assumption for the cost per cold call. So I'm assuming like you're paying someone $7 an hour. Maybe there's 100 calls made in an hour. I'm sure someone with a power dialer can do a heck of a lot more than that. But I'm just going for something that I thought sounded reasonable, at dialing about 2 people a minute until you're actually getting a hold of somebody. So here, if we look at the cost, well, the cost is higher versus RVMs, right? Significantly higher here on all the records, because you're dialing that much more. And then down here at the very bottom, now we have our total cost. Well, the total cost of cold calling, maybe, if this number is right, is definitely a lot cheaper than RVMs. But this is a highly variable cost depending upon your labor and how they're doing. This might end up being 10 cents or 15 cents per record for you, per hour as you're doing it. And so I thought it was a very interesting experiment, very interesting looking at the cold calling. To me, this takes a lot more skill level to get someone on the phone, keep them on the phone. You're just responding to people that are responding to you. Much, much different kind of a thing. So this could be a whole lot variable. I'd be interested to hear from any of our cold calling friends how they feel about these numbers as you look at kind of a per record basis and compare it to mailing. The other thing that I would say is there's a lot more labor involved as you deal with this stuff. What this doesn't measure well is, okay, you've reached people, but now what is that cost of dealing with people as they are responding to you? I would argue mailing is much, much cheaper. People generally are more qualified. Do you still get haters? Heck yeah, you still get haters, but it takes more effort for them to respond to you in a mailer than this stuff. Generally, if you're doing blind offers or something like that, people are raising their hand and qualifying themselves versus this takes a lot higher sales skills and sales knowledge. Certainly, if you're doing this the quote unquote right way, right, it's literally 2.5 times to 2 times more expensive doing it that way. So it doesn't totally discourage me necessarily from doing it. Certainly, RVMs are very, very frowned upon in a lot of circles, cold calling in some as well. All of these have risks to them. You can certainly add texting in here as a thing, right? Texting could end up being another thing to measure in terms of what that looks like. Again, coming with its own set of risks, different kind of responders that might respond to you. something that you have contracts for and software, usually additional costs that we're not really baking in here to some of this stuff. And so, my friends, I would love to hear from you. This is kind of a lengthy video as I break down all this stuff, but I would be curious to hear, what are your thoughts? How do you think about this? What are you experimenting with? Is there a different service that you think all of us should be trying or looking at? Is there something better than Direct Skip that you've tested out? I'd be curious to hear from you, know what you think, and I'll look forward to connecting with everyone soon. See ya. All right, well, that wraps up today's episode. If this was helpful, don't just let it live in your head. Take one idea from today and actually put it in practice. That, my friends, is where the real progress happens. If you want to check out and keep the conversation going with other land investors like you want to make sure to check out a whole bunch of free resources and talk about challenges that we all go through. Please come and check out our leadership and land community on Skool. We've got bonus content, real discussions, and a free leadership course. No hype required at all. Just check out leadershipinland.com or go to Skool, that's SKOOL.com/leadershipinland. Appreciate you being here. Talk soon.